What's up, guys? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this, I want to talk about what's happening with the overall markets and why I think there's going to be a little bit of a dip before we get a nice bounce and another squeeze coming to the markets before we see something else that's very different. But just notes that I'm not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. Don't forget to smash the like button. Anyways, looking at the markets, we had some decent data that came out. The Chicago PMI was above expectations, and we saw SPY push to 562 as a result of this data. Besides that, we have the Michigan consumer sentiment data, and I think that's the market's seeing a nuanced reaction. So here's my view of the market, guys. I think that something very interesting is brewing right now. I think there's going to be another squeeze coming. From the way I see things, okay, we might see a little dip today. It is possibly dip down to fill this gap. It's possible. If we don't hold 560, I do expect us to come down here, but do not panic. As long as we don't lose like 557 or so, I think that going into next week, we're gonna be looking for another big pump. I think that they might try to break this resistance right over here, the resistance that's basically building at this area, and I think that we're gonna be setting up for one final pump, basically heading into next week, and then I think what's going to happen is once we get that pump to a new all-time high, then I think the market's going to be setting up for a big reversal to the downside as we get a little bit into September. As September is historically not a great month during election years, October is also not that great, and then we're going to top somewhere, consolidate, and eventually start coming down like this. But like I said, guys, this is what I think is going to happen. This is my higher conviction for now. But whether we get this pump will depend on if we hold support. I think there might be another one coming. I think that this head and shoulders might be a trap. And I say that because we're forming a bullish divergence. Right over here, we saw one kind of form. And on top of that, it's because of the fact that I think that there might be another pump brewing on the 4 hour time frame. The PPO is nearing a crossover right here. And you have to consider the fact that we had this low here. We came up, came down, made a higher low, we came up again. If we make a higher low again, there could be potential for this nice little push. So I think we could dip a little bit today. We might be dipping back down to fill this gap, but as long as we don't lose the low from yesterday, we are going to favor a nice push. And I think we might be looking for another squeeze attempt. There might be one more coming, and all that's happening is this is not telling us the market's going to run forever. It's telling us that Wall Street might be getting ready for a big dump in September. So they're going to give us one more pump approaching. I do believe that's the most likely possibility. Now, the daily on SPY kind of suggests this as well. If you look at the daily, yes, the PPO is slowing down a little bit, but I think that we still have this high at the all-time high, and then on the 4 hour, we still have a gap to fill. So we still have this gap right over here. I think we're going to fill this gap. So I think that we're setting up for a move to the upside for next week. I think that this is a trap. We might dip a little bit, like I said before, 558 to 559 could come. As long as you don't lose this low, we're going to be looking for one more leg higher going into next week. I favor that more. If we close below 555, I will be more concerned, but I have a feeling that there's going to be another pump coming. And this is going to be the final leg up before we see a big sell off as we approach September and October. For NVIDIA, they might dump it a little bit towards this 117 area. Could go a little bit lower, but then we might get another rebound next week as long as we manage to hold above 117 going into next week as well. So watch for that. For Bitcoin, we're dipping for now. We have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure, but we're going to be looking at the support at this 57,000 area. I'll be watching to see if we get a bounce off that later on. So look for a little bit of a dip. We could even dip lower towards the 56,000 here before we try to bounce. So look for a little bit of a dip for now, and then we'll see how we end up going. For Tesla, we're nearing a bullish cross in the PPO. So what I think Tesla's going to do is the same thing I was talking about in the morning. There might be a little dip coming to Tesla. We're dipping right now as I speak, but then there's going to be a big bounce going into next week as well. I think we're kind of due for that. So I think what's starting to happen is this. We basically had a low down here. This is like our bottom at 202. We came up, we came down to make a higher low, and we might be getting ready for another push next week back into like the 215, 220 area. So this low, as long as this low holds, and as long as we maintain structure here. As long as Tesla holds like 205, I think we could be looking for a move back up like this going into next week. So I'm favoring that a little bit more. If we lose 205, we could turn more bearish, but that's what I find to be a lot more probable. I go over the support and resistance levels all the time, guys. So I'm not going to go over like everything in this video, but that's what I'm seeing for the markets. I think that we have an inverse head and shoulders forming on NQ, and I think that this is going to play out. I think this is what we're seeing as the most likely move right now. And as long as we don't lose the lows from yesterday, I think that this could pan out like this before we see another push next week. So I think we're going to be looking for a move just like this, maybe even higher, and then we could be looking for a rejection after that. As we approach October, QQQ has the same thing essentially. I think that's just like SPY, we have a similar setup. We're going to dip a little bit though. So we also have this inverse head and shoulders like structure. Like from this top here, we come all the way down, forming the left shoulder. This is our head. And our right shoulders being, we're going to try to fill this gap over here, probably maybe dip a little bit before we try this push going into next week. So it might dip like this, and we'll see how this ends up going. But I think that this could be playing out because I think they're getting ready for a sell-off that's coming in September and October. So they're going to give us one more, big pump next week. So I'm starting to hold this view. So there might be a little dip right now. Apple could dip down to about 228. If that fails us, we might come down to fill this gap around the 226 area. Then we could bounce. So look for a little bit of a dip and then a bounce later on. Looking at the IWM, we're still holding this trend line nicely. Like I said in my video earlier, we could dip to this trend line and we could rebound slowly going into next week like this. And then we'll see how it kind of goes. But watch and see us dip a little bit. We could dip lower, and then we'll see if we end up holding the trend line. For a few more, Coinbase lost support at 188, so it's looking more bearish for now. We might dip down to either 183, or if not a little bit lower, we could go all the way down to this gap fill down here before we try to rebound. So I'll be watching this. Watch 183, then basically the 178 area before we try to rebound. So we'll see how that ends up going. Amazon's building some strength right now. I think Amazon's going to try to rebound next week. We have a nice kind of like inverse head and shoulders setup as well. And I presume what's going to happen is if we do get a little dip like this, we might just continue to push and then slowly make our way up like this, start filling these imbalances going into next week before we try to see a potential rejection. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards. So long as we don't lose this low at 169, I favor that. For Meta, I called out a potential dip in the morning. As long as we don't lose this low at 511, we should try to rebound. But I am seeing some weakness kind of building here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we dip a little bit lower, kind of chop around a little bit, and then maybe we rebound. But it's not looking as strong as others out there. We're kind of choppy right here. But if we lose this low, then I will be a little bit concerned. If the low breaks, we could be coming down even lower, and we might not get much of a bounce. So Meta's not as strong looking. For Microsoft, I'm liking this. We had a low here. We came up, made a higher low. We're making higher lows. I could see a dip to about 412, 413 to 412 before we try to rebound. For Google, I see potential, but we got to hold this support. So we're at critical support right here. This could also be like an inverse head and shoulders that's forming. So I'm leaning a bit more in that direction, that this is like our head right here. Sorry if this is a little sloppy. And this could be our right shoulder before we continue higher. But it has to hold 163. As long as we hold 163, I favor that on Google. If we lose that, I'm going to be a little bit concerned. So we'll see, guys. We'll see how it goes. But anyways, with that being said, that's what my view of the market is right now. I think there might be one more pump coming thanks to these divergences, thanks to manipulation, thanks to the fact that the markets attempt to get a bullish cross in the PPO, and thanks to the fact that we have a gap above. So I'm starting to suspect there's going to be a little bit of a dip today, and then we might start pushing higher. And the higher pump that's coming may push the market to new all-time highs temporarily next week. And then that all-time high pump will also lead to the sell-off that's coming for September to October. So hopefully this video is insightful. I want to give you guys a nice view of that. That's what my view is now. I'm gaining conviction in this the more I look at the charts and the more I study them. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. For now, I find that to be the most likely possibility, but make sure you watch your levels just to be safe. I have them on my screen. You guys can always go back to my previous video to look through all the levels precisely. But for now, that's my view. Look for a little bit of a dip in the markets for now, and then we'll see if we get a bounce. And this could be setting us up for another pump for next week for big upside before we form our top and the market gets a pullback later on as we get closer to October. All right, so that's it for the video. Thank you for listening and peace out.